Hi, I'm Jacqueline Luqman with the Real News Network. In March, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, otherwise known as the DCCC, announced that it would blacklist any consulting firms that support progressive candidates who are running against incumbent House Democrats, basically cutting them off from funding. But the policy has been met with widespread scorn, and it might actually be starting to backfire for the DCCC. Here to discuss this issue with me are Ryan Grim. Ryan is the Washington bureau chief for The Intercept. He's the author of the forthcoming book, We've Got People, From Jesse Jackson to AOC, The End of Big Money and the Rise of a Movement. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, how you doing?
And I'm joined by Eugene Puryear. Eugene is a journalist, author, and activist, and he is also co-founder of Stop Police Terror Project DC and a member of DC's Movement for Black Lives Steering Committee. Hey, Eugene.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you both for joining me today. All right, so this all got started with a policy the DCCC enacted under Cheri Bousteau, who is the new chairperson of the organization. And it caused some consultants to drop a client, Marie Newman, and Newman is challenging the incumbent Democrat, Dan Lipinski, for the seat in Illinois' 3rd District. This is important because Newman's policies are far more progressive than the Blue Dog Family Values Democrat Lipinski, who voted against women's rights, LGBTQIA rights, the Affordable Care Act, $15 minimum wage. Now, this policy's already caused a lot of controversy in the party, which Ryan, The Intercept, ran a series of articles on. So, Ryan, why don't you tell us what the basis of this policy was for the DCCC to enact?
Yeah, this is the kind of DCCC pushing back against the new kind of insurgent energy within the party. And Cheri Bousteau's claims that she pledged to do this when she was running for DCCC chair and was elected, partly on the basis of it. So the DCCC is a member-driven organization, and the members are the incumbent House Democrat, and so this is them just circling the wagons and saying, this is our club, lift up the bridge, shut it off now, we're done. The irony is that they announced this policy. It had leaked out to us beforehand, but when they announced it, they included it in their message to consultants about the priority of diversity. The irony being, of course, that when you pull up the bridge and when the caucus is dominated by white members of Congress, and when the consulting industry is overwhelmingly dominated by consultants, what you're saying is this is it. We're done. And so any talk about kind of changing the complexion just falls apart.
Wow. I mean, it's interesting that you said that the DCCC announced this policy in their statement about diversity for the party. Eugene, this policy has drawn a lot of criticism because people say that it will, in effect, do nothing but entrench political power in the Democratic Party for largely old white men. What do you say to that?
I mean, I think in sort of the just reality of who's already there, and maybe perhaps older people in general, more conservative people as well, regardless of race, can be put in there. I mean, you look at some of the other insurgent races we've started to see emerge in Black and Latino districts that are, all heavily gerrymandered, deeply blue. So I think that is true in the most general sense. But I think this is sort of an interesting thing, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, I think on a couple levels. One, I actually think political consultants are highly overrated, quite frankly, and the sort of DC political consultant class sort of self-referentially refers itself to other candidates to sort of further the mythology that they have all the answers, which I don't think is true. I think also, too, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out longer term in terms of how people relate to the party establishment. establishment. I mean, I've said for some time now, I think that we're really in sort of a slow motion political realignment here. And I think what this will really do is start to harden those lines. You'll start to see really parallel infrastructures and ecosystems start to emerge to do some of the important tasks for new, more insurgent progressive candidates. And again, as I pointed out, in our highly gerrymandered reality, I'm not surprised the D-Trip went this way, because a lot of their members are going to be deeply vulnerable because they won't be able to play any sort of card that well if you vote for a more progressive Democrat in a primary, or quite frankly, if you were to vote for a third-party candidate in a general election in many of these districts, that it would throw it to a more conservative Republican or the like. And so I think in some ways, this might actually have a fill-up effect, which is, I think, the reverse of what the D-Trip is hoping for, but it might have a fill-up effect for more progressive campaigns as it forces people who want to run outside the establishment and outside the system to develop the necessary expertise themselves. And I think the more people see that a layperson can figure these things out, and that, as we've seen with some of the grassroots campaigns that have been successful, without all these consultants, you can win. It could be a big change to the political landscape.
I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
I think Eugene's totally right that it could end up developing this alternative infrastructure, and the D-Trip might come to deeply regret it. One disagreement I'd have with them on the first part is that, yes, absolutely, most consultants are overrated, particularly when it comes to pollsters or television ad buyers. But we're actually using the term consultant very broadly here. A number of candidates that I've talked to who haven't wanted to go on the record yet, they're not sure if they're going to run, for instance, are losing their compliance consultant. Like, this is just kind of a person they need to file their documents with the FEC. Marie Newman lost 2 of her male consultants. So, in other words, people whose expertise is in designing mailers and making sure that they land on people's doorstep. And so, and those people are consultants. They're for hire. They'll do whatever. If you're running on Medicare for all and abolishing ICE, they'll design a mailer for you that says abolish ICE and et cetera. Like AOC, for instance, needed consultants in order to help file her FEC documents and to help get the mail out the door. So there are some kind of basic infrastructure needs that even the most rudimentary campaign requires, and if you can't find anybody to do that for you, like asking Marie Newman, who's a small business owner, to figure out the FEC website herself, is just going to take up all of her time, which she needs to use to be out campaigning and meeting voters. And so, absolutely, I 99% agree with Eugene, but we have to understand how serious this DCCC policy is in the sense that it could basically end a campaign.
So, Eugene, how do you feel about Ryan's comments about consultants being kind of painted with a broad brush and some are actually necessary?
Well, I think Ryan's point is very well taken, and as someone who's dealt with FEC filings myself and ballot access and things like that, it can be very complicated. Mail, I've actually done some of my own mailers for multiple issues, sort of by hand. And there's a lot of things that you do need to learn and you do need to put out there, and a lot of great people who do that work for progressive folks already. But I think it raises a slightly bigger question as well. Because the fact that these foundational tasks have to happen for those of us who are working in the grassroots and progressive social movements, those who want to be in those spaces, but who also feel that electoral action will sometimes be necessary, how do we start to not only gain that knowledge as sort of on-the-ground organizers and activists, but start to crowdsource it, start to produce, easy how-to manuals and things like that? Because I think there are a lot of essential fundamental things that have to be done, but I think the more that we can sort of take the mystique out of it, and quite frankly, take the sort of industry out of it and the commercialization out of it, the more success I think that progressive campaigns are going to be able to have, the easier it will be for them to get off the ground. But absolutely, I do think that it's more than fair to say that initially, I do believe that because of some of these hurdles, that this will have a big impact on certain candidates who are looking for help on some of these pretty thorny issues, and it's highly problematic for that reason.
It's also had sort of the opposite effect in that progressive groups with those consultants with that kind of experience that are not affiliated with the DCCC have stepped up to fill in the gap where the DCCC's money was supposed to basically eliminate these campaigns. Like Democracy for America actually stepped in to support Newman. There are other progressive consultant organizations that have come in to support progressive candidates that are losing their funding for the DCCC. So, I mean, is this policy starting to backfire?
Yeah, and that goes to Eugene's really good point that, like, people who are reading these news stories who do consulting work might say, you know what? Wow, I do FEC. Let's say I do FEC compliance or I do mail. All right, if I can get by without DCCC business, I now know that there's going to be this industry of primary challengers, and there's more than enough out there, to help people make a healthy living. And so you're going to start seeing people make career decisions and say, you know what, fine, I'm only going to do FEC compliance work, even though that's just rudimentary stuff. I'm just going to do FEC compliance work for insurgent challengers. That's the niche I'm going to fill. And in a couple cycles, you're right, you could have this entire party infrastructure that is separate from the party. And now the DCCC would end up facing this, well-formed threat. So I think you're exactly right that they're going to come to regret this in a couple of years.
Well, I think this policy is definitely an interesting tactic that the DCCC took, trying to crush the insurgent progressive wave, but they may have ended up just growing it bigger. And we will certainly continue watching, Ryan Grimm, the coverage that we're sure you're going to continue to provide in The Intercept. We know you have to go, and we will be back with the next segment in the continued discussion of this very strange policy from the DCCC. This is Jacqueline Luqman with the Real News Network in Baltimore.